Start. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the final episode of our CCUS Demystified series. This time featuring Louisiana, since it's Mardi Gras season, looking at Louisiana leading the way in CCUS. My name is Alex Krauka. I am a Deputy Program Director at the United States Energy Association, mainly working on our consensus program. For those who aren't familiar, our consensus program works to build a domestic and international consensus on the needs for and uses of various clean fossil energy technologies, hydrocarbon technologies, such as CCUS, clean coal technologies, hydrogen with CCUS, and others. We carry out this work through briefings and webinars like the one we're hosting today, workshops that we'll host nationally, sometimes internationally. We also produce various research reports and white papers, and then we have a bi-monthly newsletter to help keep our stakeholders informed. Just a quick logistical note here. This webinar is being recorded. We plan to host the recording on our event page at USEA.org. Please give us a few days to get that recording up, and we'll notify everyone once that has occurred. We're going to hold Q&A until after the questions. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box down at the bottom there. And if for any continuing education units or professional development credits, if anyone's attending and would like confirmation of their attendance for qualifying hours for either of those, please contact me at akrauka@usea.org. Now, just a quick few basic terms to know before we get into the nitty-gritty of CCUS and CCUS in Louisiana. So the acronym refers to carbon capture, use, and storage, or more technically, carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration. It's a process where we capture CO2 emissions from power generation industrial sources, and then either use that CO2 for another purpose, such as enhanced oil recovery or production of building materials, or storing that CO2 safely and securely underground. So when you hear geologic storage, that's referring to the permanent storage of CO2 in deep underground formations. You may hear discussion of Class 2 and Class 6 wells. Those are EPA designated injection wells for enhanced oil recovery and geologic storage. Class 2 being for EOR, Class 6 being for storage. And EOR, as I said, is enhanced oil recovery, a technique where CO2 is injected into depleted oil fields to extract additional oil. So in the context of CCUS, I think there's some kind of misinformation going around that this administration is not supportive of CCUS. As I understand it, and I do not speak for DOE, I'm just expressing my understanding of it. The administration is supportive of CCUS in the context of enhanced oil recovery and expanding this nation's oil and gas drilling. And finally, ending, why CCUS? There's kind of two sides of the coin here. This is a great economic development opportunity. It makes American products marketable in certain global contexts. In areas where CO2 emissions may be a focus, thinking about carbon border adjustment mechanisms. So if you have products made in the U.S. And the emissions are captured through that manufacturing process, that may make that product more marketable in a place like the EU. Obviously, construction jobs, tax revenue opportunities, and others. And then on the other side of the coin are the environmental benefits. If you're someone who's concerned about the climate, according to the IPCC, the world won't reach its climate goals without CCUS. So it's one of those technologies that actually brings folks together from the right and the left, which is exciting. But at the same time, it also brings opposition from the right and the left as well. So it's an interesting dynamic technology. We'll get into it some more here. So with that, I'm going to introduce our speakers and then pass it off to our President and Chief Executive Officer to introduce USEA and then kick us off. So our speakers today are Dr. Mark Zappi, Executive Director of ULL's Energy Institute of Louisiana, Michael Hecht, President and CEO of Greater New Orleans, Inc., Stephen Schreiber, Deputy Secretary at the Louisiana Department of Conservation and Energy, and then moderating today and introducing our first speaker is the Honorable Mark Menezes, President, Chief Executive Officer here at the United States Energy Association, former Deputy Secretary of Energy, and I think most important in the context of today, a native of Louisiana and a graduate of LSU. So with that, Mark, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Alex, and welcome everyone to USEA's continuing educational series on CCUS. And as Alex said, we have saved the best for last. As being a native Louisianian, and Alex, I would just add that I'm an actual double LSU graduate, also receiving my law degree there. Now, today, we are featuring real-world experiences focusing on Louisiana's recent experiences since obtaining primacy of the Class 6 injection wells in 2024. But before we begin, let me just say a few words about USEA. USEA is a nonprofit, nonpartisan institution founded in 1924 as the U.S. member of the World Energy Council. Today, as Alex mentioned, we convene and conduct forums and workshops for the public, our members, and energy stakeholders. And we sponsor educational events, such as today's event, on timely and important energy topics. USEA also supports global access to affordable and reliable energy in partnership with the U.S. government. And you can learn more about us and become a member at our website, usea.org. Now, before turning to our panel of experts, I do feel compelled to say a few words about the work of many in the policy arena that have gotten us to the point where we are today with 6 states with primacy for Class 6 injection wells, which has caused quite a significant amount of projects to be announced and undertaken both in CCS and CCUS. Now, my own experience in this goes back over 20 years, back when I was Chief Counsel for the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and then much later as Deputy Secretary of Energy, during which policies were developed to try to incent and address technological challenges and put in place regulatory processes to actually encourage the use of CCUS technologies. Much effort went into this. And indeed, hours were spent, and many, many days and weeks were spent in trying to develop guidance coming out of Treasury, the regulations to go into effect, and indeed to actually help grant for the first time back in 2020 primacy back in 2018, primacy to North Dakota and then Wyoming during my service at the Department of Energy. So really excited to hear about today. I think it's really important to hear from Louisiana what they have experienced, both the success and, some of the issues that have come up, the action taken by the governor that we all know about. And not only to hear from Louisiana, but I think it's important too for those of you, Texas and Arizona, that now have primacy as to what lessons have learned. So I'm really excited about today's panel. So I want to thank the panelists for being here. And now, without any further ado, let me turn to Dr. Zappi. It's good to see you again, and the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Let me see if I could crank this up. Okay, let me ask my panel members, are you seeing it?
Yes, we are.
Okay,
Yes.
good, good. Well, thank you so much. My pleasure to be here. Real excited to be in the heart of energy country, as well as one of the leading areas of the evolving CCUS technology. Um, I'm going to open up with a little introduction because I know that we may have some new members, new audience that doesn't quite know the process of CCS. And I'm going to tie it some ways back to Louisiana because that's our focus today. But I like to start off, and when we talk, and I'm going to focus on CCS, not the U part. The U part is today primarily focusing on enhanced oil recovery. There's some evolving technologies that will produce chemicals in the future that I'm excited about. A lot of people doing research in that, but today most of it is in the EOR, enhanced oil recovery. But in the CCS process, it's a 1, 2, 3 step. At the plant, we're capturing CO2, we're concentrating it. Step one, step two is the transport through pipelines. These pipelines can be relatively short. They can be somewhat longer, depending on where your injection site is. Some of the first sites in Louisiana, we're talking miles, several miles to move the CO2 that's captured before it's injected. Some of the newer plants that we're announcing in Louisiana are building their injection points fairly close to the plant. So that pipeline can be longer distances or short. The third step, of course, is the injection of the captured CO2. And I'm showing you the subsurface right here. And you notice these arrows because we're literally injecting into ideal formations that have been well studied, thousands of feet down, typically 5 to 8,000, 9,000 feet below the surface. Far away, thousands of feet from any drinking water aquifers, which we want to be very protective. And so we're going down, I've skipped thousands of feet here, but as we inject, and notice these formations, a lot of people don't realize that naturally these formations where we're injecting the CO2, and even before we injected CO2, are naturally under high pressures, 2,500, 4,000 pounds per square inch. So for us to inject it, we've got to pressurize that CO2 down to or up into the 2,500, 3,000 psi so we could force it down into the subsurface. And then the primary mechanism early into the process to keep it from moving upward is what's called a cap rock. It's a low permeability zone. But if you look off to the right here, you can see that oftentimes we have multiple cap rocks that offer many degrees of protection as we go up because as if you look at formations, it's this laminar or layered effect as we go down. So your drinking water aquifers tend to be less than 1,000 feet typically, and then we're going down 7,000 feet, 8,000 feet for an injection point. A little bit of science. I throw this up. The audience usually goes, "Oh my God!" But what I want to show here is when you take carbon dioxide and you pressurize it, and remember, I've got to pressurize it to shoot it down into that formation that's already under pressure. It converts it at a standard temperature, and we get to anything above 1,400 psi. The CO2 changes and goes into what's called a supercritical state. And this supercritical CO2 is used to decaffeinate coffee, used in dry cleaning. It's commonly used in industry, in the food industry, as a matter of fact. And in this picture right here, you can barely see the liquid. It's kind of a semi-liquid. And what's really cool about this is that it flows through sands or aquifers like a gas, but it's got the density of a liquid. So it's an amazing fluid. It's not truly a liquid. It's not a gas. It's a supercritical liquid. So we're pressurizing the CO2 to move it through the pipelines as well as injecting down hole. Now, as a consequence of that, it forms this supercritical fluid. And this is a typical plant in Louisiana. This would be a coal plant. So what comes out of a coal plant, out of the stack gas, is about 10% CO2. We then go through a process, and these processes have been around for quite some time, where we concentrate the CO2 using a chemical, an ethanolamine, for you chemists out there, and we concentrate that CO2 up to 98% or higher CO2. So I'm dealing with primarily pure CO2 here. I remove the moisture out of there, and then I move it through my pipeline. That pipeline may be 2 miles, it may be 60 miles. And oftentimes it's under pressure, so I can move it down that pipeline. Then I get to my injection point, 8,000 feet down in my example here. I'm shooting my 98% CO2 down there, and I'm showing here as an example 2,500 PSI. So this is an essence, and I'm showing you some numbers so you can see how the technology is implemented. Now, I was asked at a public meeting a really interesting question, so I love this slide. If I have 100 cubic feet of a balloon of CO2 at atmosphere, if I just have it sitting above the ground and I pressurize it to form a supercritical CO2, that 100 cubic feet goes all the way down to 0.27 cubic feet. So you could see the benefit of this compression that we're getting. And again, I have to pressurize it anyway to get it into the formation, but you can see the tremendous amount of reduction in compression that I'm getting to put in the gas. Oftentimes, people think that we're compressing this gas and shooting it into a standard pressure. Again, no, we're injecting it at about the same pressure, a little bit more than what that formation is. So now let's look at the pipeline. We've been doing pipelines since for the 1970s, as a matter of fact. The United States has about 6,000 miles of CO2 pipeline. A lot of it is in Louisiana. They have a good safety record. About 90% of them traditionally have been used for enhanced oil recovery, so the U part of it. And they're cheap. They're safe and they're cheap, and they're an easy way to move it. We do take the water out of it, so we don't have any corrosion issues in our pipeline, or the pipeline could be lined. This is our pipeline that flows, one of the big ones, through Louisiana. And you can see it starts in Jackson, Mississippi, goes down and crosses the state of Louisiana to go to enhance oil recovery sales out in the Texas area. Now, this Jackson is called the Jackson Dome. And I like highlighting this because when they first built this, it was to capture natural CO2 under pressure that was in a reservoir. So instead of making CO2 above ground, they were taking a dome of CO2 and moving it. And I point this out because people say, can we really put CO2 underground for thousands to millions of years? Well, the power above, God did it. And so we know that it's possible to do that. I like to also show that pipelines are nothing new for Louisiana and actually the United States. And you can see some of the other pipelines that we have across the United States. As I said, we have about 6,000 miles of CO2 pipeline. But pipelines have been around, very common, and have a really solid track record when it comes to safety. Getting back to, and Mark had mentioned that class, or Alex had mentioned class 6 wells, what we're using for the CCS process, and Louisiana does have primacy. DOE estimates that the United States, the formations we have right now, we have between 600 years to 1,200 years of capturing all the CO2 and storing it, if we wanted to, deep in the subsurface in these state safe zones. These are some of the example formations that can be used. Most of the ones that are being looked at are primarily the saline formations. And why Louisiana? We get asked a lot. Well, this is like a weather chart right here. These are the 4 primary formations. You can see here's the saline formation. And anywhere you see color, that's a good spot. That's where we've identified. And you can see I've circled Louisiana. And all 4 of them, Louisiana and Southeast Texas, are excellent places to perform that S of the CCS process. Now, how does landowners interface with this? Well, I'm often asked if I'm selling my pore space, and that your pore space, here's soil particles of your aquifer or sand. The space in between is where that that supercritical CO2 is going to be placed into it for permanent storage. There are two rules that are used, and the American rule is the one that's most followed. It's one used in Louisiana. And a landowner in Louisiana and in many of the other states, almost all the United States, um, you could have mineral servitudes or mineral rights, but then you can also lease your land for pore space. So just because you have mineral rights leased out, you also can lease out that pore space. And a lot of companies, a lot of private landowners, a lot of families are making income from leasing that pore space for the CCS process. Where is your pore space? Well, it follows your fence line essentially all the way down into the ground. So that's your pore volume, your pore space, and that can be leased to support a CCS project. You do have to give your mineral servitude owner, your holder of your mineral rights, access to that product, but you can have two separate leases going on actually for your land. These CCS projects do an injection, and I'm showing an injection zones here. I'm not going to go through all the details, but to successfully obtain the rights to utilize to get a Class 6 well approved, there was a lot of monitoring that's going to be going on throughout the process, and particularly being highly protected of those valuable drinking water zones. So a lot of monitoring techniques. This is not simply just let's shoot it underground and ignore it. It's amazing the amount of engineering that's going into. And first of all, it's amazing the amount of engineering that goes into to make sure we have the right site to even start with. So a lot of design, a lot of engineering goes into this. I said this is a 1, 2, 3 process. All of these processes, whether it's the capture, the pipeline, or the injection, have been around since the late 60s and the 70s. So we have basically 50 years of operational experience. People say this is a new technology. No, it's actually not. There's a lot of engineering, a lot of knowledge out there that's been around for many years, and that is being used to properly design these systems. We like to look at risks. An engineer, when we do designs, it's all about risk management. And these are all the concerns that you've probably heard about when it comes to applying CCS. And if projects are done correctly, if properly designed, and I'm going to start off with that, we find that all of these concerns are actually a very low risk. Probably the highest risk one is it may cost you a little bit more than you're thinking of. That's what we hear most of the time. But many of these other technological issues really, if done right, or represent a low risk. So for CCS to be effective, we got to pick the right site, properly selected. It's got to be properly designed. It's got to be maintained and operated properly. If we do this, we have technology that can be safely applied and used to help grow our economy and also help protect our environment. Now, I show this slide because, as I mentioned, I'm an engineer. I'm a chemical engineer by training. We do these complex designs, and a design is really risk management. And people will ask me all the time, Dr. Zappik, can you absolutely guarantee me that this CCS project won't fail? My typical answer, it's a very, very, very low risk. And I show other complex engineered systems that have low risk. New Orleans right there in 2019, unfortunately, we had a collapse. I don't know about y'all, but when I drive through Washington, D.C., New Orleans, or any city, I'm not worried about buildings falling down because they're low risk, and we've done such a good job with the engineering. Same thing with bridges. This is I-35. We've able to keep those risks very low. So can anybody say there's no way anything can happen? No. In fact, we had a natural gas pipeline rupture very recently, but very, very low risk given the amount of how many buildings we have, how many bridges we have, even a laptop right here showing a lithium battery. Although I must say, as hot as my laptop's been getting, I'm a little worried. So I'm going to end it and talk a little bit more about Louisiana. We know that existing companies in Louisiana can utilize CCS to work with their carbon capture and produce a product that they can sell globally that has a low carbon footprint, that low carbon indice. However, another way to look at this is if you're looking at many places in Louisiana, if you have excellent formations below your ground and companies are looking to site somewhere, if you could offer them right beside their plant access to a formation that they could capture their CO2 and store it, we're going to start seeing many of these grassroots, these new construction projects, and we have 2 or 3 of them already in Louisiana where this is happening. By Louisiana having so many good places to inject our CO2, we're building new plants right beside the injection site, all in a single parish. So it's not just removing the CO2 from a county or a parish 50 miles away, then and injecting it 50 miles away in a well. We're going to see a lot of new construction. And as our state starts utilizing the good resources we were blessed with, we're going to be able to recruit companies that are looking, where can I get rid of my CO2 and where do I have the right workforce? And Louisiana really stacks up well for that. So we're very excited about that opportunity. Now, here are the 2 biggest areas of Louisiana. I'm not going to bore you with any of the chemistry, but making hydrogen in the world, the #1 way is making it from natural gas. If I make it from natural gas and I go through these reactions, I produce CO2 and hydrogen. If I release, like most of the facilities do right now, that CO2 in the atmosphere, we call it gray hydrogen. If I capture the CO2 using CCS and inject it into permanent storage, I now have blue hydrogen. So I wanted to pass that terminology on to you. The new facilities that we're so proud to be announcing in Louisiana are blue, carbon neutral facilities, where gray is we're releasing carbon into the atmosphere. And this is what stems such a new era of industrial investment in Louisiana, because we have that formation and because we're recruiting companies that want to produce blue hydrogen. Another one is, and I'm going to use methanol. We just recently had an announcement of Sungas in central Louisiana is taking wood and converting it into a synthesis gas, which is very similar in many ways to natural gas, and producing green methanol, which is going to be used in our case as a marine bunker fuel. This is it'd be carbon neutral if I didn't capture the CO2 I'm going to be producing, but by merit of capturing that CO2, because if I'm using trees to make my fuel, by merit of that we're capturing CO2 out of the atmosphere, I'm carbon neutral. But if I capture that CO2 like I show here, I now have a very low carbon index facility, and I could sell this methanol as a highly green methanol, which has a lot of value. In fact, Louisiana is #1 in methanol production in the United States, and with hydrogen, we're #2. California is higher than us, and then Texas is #3. So I'm going to end by talking about, we have over $60 billion of new construction underway or planned. These are all blue-green manufacturing facilities. So by having the CCS capability, it's allowing us to recruit this investment. All of the blue that we hear in our $5 billion CF industry investment, without CCS, we won't have this level of investment. We won't have all these new jobs coming in. Recently, we were so excited to welcome Hyundai to the state of Louisiana. They're going to be making blue hydrogen at the facility. If they don't have access to CCS, we will never get the 1,000 or so jobs in the $8 billion of investment. The green one I mentioned earlier is a $5 billion investment, and this is going to have a very low carbon index. Now, you'll notice here I underline we have to have CCS. We also, for other projects that are green and blue in the state of Louisiana, are going to need solar energy. So these are 2 key technologies that our state and others are going to have to be able to offer if we're going to be successful in recruiting these companies. If I can't utilize CCS in Louisiana, we're going to see a lot of these opportunities disappear. So I'm going to end it there. Hopefully you found it informative. And I'll pass the baton on to whoever's next. And thank you for having me here today. I'll stop sharing.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Zappi. I found that extraordinarily informative. And we're going to reserve questions till all of our panelists speak. I think you've laid the foundation now for our next speaker, Michael Heck. Michael is president and CEO of the Greater New Orleans, Inc. Michael?
Michael, you're muted.
Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So this is actually a great follow-up to Dr. Zappi, because if he's got the brains, then I've got the looks or something like that, because he kind of explained the science behind carbon capture. I'm going to explain what it means to me and to our organization as economic developers trying to drive growth. And the way that I think about it is that carbon capture is the linchpin of clean growth in Louisiana. As Mark said, if we have it, we have billions of investment. If we don't, then it all goes away. Let's see if I can. There we go. Okay, we already went through this. I'll skip with this one because Mark talked about it. Let me talk again, though, about why it makes sense for Greater New Orleans and for Louisiana. We've got our industrial heritage. We've got the most important industrial river in America that serves 32 states and provinces. We've got a history with our workforce and our project management. We happen to have the right geology, as Dr. Zappi talked about, with our layers of clay, our natural saline aquifers, as well, of course, as with our abandoned oil wells that can be used. And also, and this, I think Mark talked about this a little bit, we're the number one producer per capita of industrial hydrogen in the US, oftentimes using it to make ammonia, which is often used for fertilizer, as well as other things like refining steel. And when you make this out of natural gas, which is cheap and plentiful in Louisiana because of fracking, then carbon dioxide is the byproduct. And that's where carbon capture comes into play. So we just happen to have the right combination of pre-existing natural and man-made assets combined with industrial demand. The other benefit of carbon capture is that it hits us at a number of places on our value chain. We've obviously got the large-scale retrofit at industrial facilities. We've got the transportation infrastructure, and then there's the actual development of sites, the characterization, the drilling, and the monitoring. The numbers are big and growing. Currently, about 5,000 construction jobs in Louisiana, 2,500 ongoing operation jobs, about $14 billion in investment. These tend to be high wage jobs, $80,000 to $90,000. Louisiana is one of the poorest states in the country, and our average income is well below the US average. So when we're talking about roles that are 80,000 plus, it's just about double the average income in Louisiana. And when we talk about the pipeline, and here I mean the economic development pipeline, for projects that are dependent in some way upon carbon capture, it actually can go up to $260 billion. Now, not all of these are going to come to fruition, but it's literally tens of billions of dollars of future projects. The key to this, and this is what gets missed sometimes, is that we have two competing global trends, and I don't think that anybody thinks they're going to go away. One is that energy demand is going through the roof. ChatGPT takes 17 times more energy per search than Google, also lies to you like a 4-year-old about it. But regardless, it's taking a lot more energy, and everybody believes that because of the demands for compute combined with things like electric vehicles, that energy demands are going to continue to go up. At the same time, the demand for lower carbon emissions and being more gentle on the environment are also going to continue. Using natural gas to make hydrogen, for example, and then carbon capture and other carbon capture use cases, we believe is the only way that we can meet America's energy and industrial demand while continuing to reduce impact on the environment. So in that sense, we see it as a linchpin, not just for our economy, but for national security and the national environment. And now I want to end by going through a few use cases so people can understand that what we're talking about is not just a hypothetical, it's not just an academic exercise, but there are real projects, real jobs that are happening where without, if not but for carbon capture, they don't happen. So the first one is Hyundai Steel, first North American ultra low carbon steel mill in Ascension Parish. In this case, the hydrogen that's going to be used to refine the steel is going to be blue hydrogen, and that's going to allow them to have this low carbon steel. There's also going to be capture of emissions. It's a $6 billion investment, over 5,000 permanent high paying jobs. It does not happen. Now, the question people will ask is, why does Hyundai care? Why does it have to be a low carbon steel mill? Well, it's because the customers of Hyundai Steel around the world are demanding a low carbon steel. And so that is why ultimately it's market driven. Meta is building its biggest AI center in the world in rural Northeast Louisiana, one of the poorest parts of Louisiana, 1,500 jobs, a $10 billion investment at this point. Again, because of their promises to their customers and to the market, they have to have a low emissions facility. And so they're going to be using carbon capture to capture over 95% of the CO2 emissions that would otherwise be associated not with the facility itself. It's a building with a bunch of data of computers in it, but with the energy production, the massive energy production required to run the facility. CF Industries in Ascension Parish, near where my family is from in Donaldsonville, what they do is that they take hydrogen, convert that into ammonia, which is then used for a number of products like methanol, but most significantly to make fertilizer, which gets exported around the world. And in this case, again, because of their customers, they need to use clean hydrogen. There's a little bit of green, but it's mostly blue, and that's due to carbon capture, where natural gas is being split. The hydrogen goes to CF, and the CO2 goes into an injection site. Woodside Energy, Australian company, $18 billion in Calcasieu Parish, is using carbon capture for emission abatement. And then right here, Venture Global, a domestic company out of DC, close to $40 billion, the largest privately financed investment in human history, is using carbon capture. Again, I shouldn't have said CCUS. I should have just said CCS is using it to make sure that the facility itself is a low emissions, a low to no emissions facility. And so I'm sorry, I just needed something to show that we were going to be great again. So I had to go back to 2010. The point is that this represents a Super Bowl type of opportunity for Louisiana. We're using this linchpin technology. We can grow jobs, grow output, and do it in a way that is more gentle to our mother nature and the environment. Thanks so much, Mark.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael. Really appreciate you giving the overview of the tens of billions of dollars of opportunity that this presents to the state. It's super exciting. With that, we're going to move over to Stephen Schreiber, Deputy Secretary at the Louisiana Department of Conservation and Energy, to discuss some exciting updates from the state level and how they're dealing with the increasing interest in CCUS in Louisiana. So, Stephen, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Alex. Can everyone see? I didn't know I was going to pop up in the bottom left again, but can everyone see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. I don't think I can undo that now, so we're going to go with it. I was going to undo it. Thanks, Michael, for teeing up some of those opportunities and also reminding me that you could have watched you could have been born after the Saints won the Super Bowl and be driving on the roads now. That's a little jarring to me. It doesn't seem like it's old enough for that, but I'm going to get over that and start up real quick here. So like Alex said, I'm with the Department of Conservation and Energy here in Louisiana. We're the regulator who has primacy over the Class 6 wells. So while Michael had the kind of pizzazz to demonstrate some of the opportunities that we have for economic development related to CCS here in Louisiana, I'm going to talk about what we're doing at the state government level to help keep this activity safe and moving along just fine. Did I have a slide before that? All right, so Louisiana was the third state in the nation to receive Class 6 primacy. That means that we kind of step into the role of the EPA through an agreement with the EPA to permit what we call Class 6 injection wells. There are many classes of wells, but for our purposes, we have Class 5, which are test wells that operators can drill to get the geologic data that they need to formulate their Class 6 application. And a Class 6 well is for the injection of a material such as carbon dioxide. So to give us a little timeline, Louisiana had been trying. Mark, I know that you were instrumental over at the federal level while I was still in the private sector to get states primacy because those states know that their specific geology, they work only in their states, whereas the EPA kind of has to worry about a nationwide apparatus. So to put these applications into the home states in our opinion, a wise move. That's why we applied for and gained primacy in 2023. We're the third state after North Dakota and Wyoming. So the process of attaining primacy, a lot of people have to understand our regulations needed to be robust. We needed to have the staff to do this, and we needed the technical capability to perform. And we needed to have at least as strict of regulations as the EPA. This process involved many public hearings, public comment periods, and ultimately was awarded to Louisiana. We'd like to point out that Louisiana's regulations are the strongest in the nation. Some of these, you can see some of these examples over here. We ID all the wells. We don't simply permit an area of review and allow operators to move their injection wells around. Our area of review includes areas of increased pressure as well as the area of the CO2 plume. And we identify all the wells that penetrate the base freshwater supplies. So this function sits within the Underground Injection Control Division that has always been charged with protecting drinking water in the state of Louisiana. So that is kind of their bread and butter, their purpose, their mission is to ensure that nothing that you inject through a disposal well or a storage well migrates and impacts underground sources of drinking water. So making sure that anything that penetrates those aquifers is safe and done engineered correctly is the purpose of that entire division. We've had a lot of legislation in the meantime as well. So even 2023, 2024, 2025, our legislature really laid the legal framework, legal groundwork that's gonna govern carbon sequestration in the state. So providing for eminent domain authority of pipeline transportation. Keep in mind this has been significantly tightened in the 2025 session. Now operators need to get 85% of their right-of-ways voluntarily, and they also have to be common carriers. So basically the same way that an oil and gas pipeline is regulated for purposes of eminent domain for right-of-ways. That is something that you're going to also have to do for carbon dioxide pipelines. Unitization is a process by which, when you have landowners who are in agreement to have this underneath them, when there's other landowners around you, that you also compensate at the level of those landowners. That's unitization. It's a process with legal origins in minerals, right? If you have oil under your property and someone's extracting that by drilling over on another piece of property, you're still going to get compensated for that when you're unitized. So there's a whole legal process and framework around that. We've limited landowner liability, and we've also added a lot of health and safety regulations. I mean, when you're talking about emergency response, when we're talking about monitoring, when we're talking about the plans they have to contiguously update, all of that has kind of come through a lot of the legislation, and we think really added up to a very robust safety protocol for this activity. As far as the actual permit activity, so as of when we received Class 6 primacy, the EPA was working through about 32 pending applications for Class 6 wells. That's a lot of applications. I don't have the number right in front of me. I believe that's 60% of the total wells applied for in the nation. That's right here in Louisiana. So we've got a very high burden of applications to work through and get through relative to what the EPA was working through prior to us receiving that primacy. And keep in mind, we received these all in one day. We're granted primacy, and then we get the applications in our inbox. So we have and that's only the class 6 wells. We also have the class 5 wells for which we do a lot of project characterization as well. We have issued one permit. That was the Hackberry project in Cameron Parish. That permit is issued. We have another permit that is just past the public hearing. So the public comment period has ended on that one, and we anticipate issuing that permit fairly shortly. End of last year, yes, October 2025, Governor Landry did issue an executive order pausing new Class 6 applications pending review of the ones we have in the backlog. So we're going to focus on the existing applications. We're going to make sure that the projects get through. We are prioritizing them in order of a few things, technical merit, how far along they are in finalizing their well locations. Making sure that they're pretty much done with their application before we really start to review it. Off-taker agreements, local support, a lot of things that make the projects easier. That'll help us to look at it more quickly, get them out the door, so we can work through our backlog of applications. Existing applications remain in the queue. They're subject to review. The progress is going to vary on a case-by-case basis, and ultimately the governor will decide when it's appropriate for us to start intaking new applications once again. A few takeaways from our prioritization process, right? So, also from the executive order, we're gonna start leaning. We're gonna work with our local economic and state economic development partners to determine the economic benefits that factors into our cost benefit analyses. We're gonna require more stringent. Maybe not more stringent is the right word. We're going to be asking our applicants to really engage in robust community engagement. This is going to require, documented outreach to local stakeholders, local governments. When those local governments raise their concerns, we want applicants to be addressing those in a forthright manner and documenting that. We do want to see that the applicants are getting out in front of this, because that is something that we've seen. We've seen a lot of local opposition when people don't understand what is being applied to occur near their community. So if there's any lawyers on the call, I apologize, but in our view, we do not believe that regulatory box checking is going to be sufficient to get these projects off the ground. You actually have to engage with the community. You have to understand that all of industry has a social license to operate, and that we need to develop projects responsibly and in a very transparent manner if we're gonna have that buy-in from the communities that we need to operate, or that really the applicants need to operate. And we're going to be coordinating with our other agencies as well. So we have received, it's been fairly newsworthy. We've gotten a lot of concerns from the public at large. People are maybe unfamiliar with this process and have a lot of questions about its safety. I know Dr. Zappi went through a lot of the mitigation of that concern earlier, but it's still very important to be out there in the public and letting people know, just how far underground this is, just all the layers of cap rock involved, all of the engineering that goes into this process. I think is widely misunderstood, and it's incumbent on all of us, both as a regulator and as an applicant, to be out in the community and communicating these things clearly. Eminent domain concerns, and of course the economic impact, as Michael and Dr. Zappi went over. There's a lot of the economic impacts could be indirect or maybe related to a project rather than from the specific injection activity itself. So I did have a little bit of an overview here, not to step on Michael's toes about the opportunities that we have here. And I did also want to highlight that Governor Landry and Department of Conservation, Energy, Economic Development, we just rolled out a Whole-of-Louisiana Energy Strategy with a lot of our priorities, a lot of pillars to capture and kind of capitalize on all of our regions' specific advantages. So I do invite you to go check that out as well. A lot of regions have a carbon a carbon sequestration competitive advantage. And if you want to capitalize the opportunities for your kids and grandkids, it's very possible that that has to be a part of your all of the above energy strategy. So we did have some lessons learned. I promise, Mark, this is my final slide. Public trust and community engagement can make or break projects. We now have a statute. One of the statutes that was passed was that the department is going to take substantial consideration of local government comments. So it's very incumbent on applicants to engage with the local governments, to engage with emergency responders and the monitoring and the community, and make sure that people understand what is going to be taking place and where and why and how. So engage communities early, be transparent, and emphasize the permanence of storage and your regulatory oversight. The sheer sophistication of your project should shine through once you start to communicate in that forthright manner. So that's where we are. If you have any questions, I got my contact up here, and happy to engage with the panel members and take any questions. Thank you, Mark.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Stephen, and the panelists. I should alert everyone listening and the panelists as well. Our chat box is open where questions can come in. And I invite the panelists that if they wish to, they can respond directly to those questions in the chat box. And I see that it's been active. And so some of the questions have been answered. Some of these questions, the whole group could benefit from. But before moving on to some of those questions, Stephen, you made a couple of points that I think is worth just sort of elaborating on or discussing. One, when I initially discussed the moratorium, if you will, that the governor had put in on processing, he talked about the number of applicants received. You made a point that I don't know if everybody is aware of. Essentially, those 33 applications all sort of appeared almost immediately following the granting of primacy, right? Now, from those that have been following this for years, that really is, while it's surprising to me, but I was reflecting on it, in part because EPA was a little reluctant. Let me step back and say that the governor made clear in his executive order why he was doing what he was doing, first of all. And for our listeners, if you haven't seen it, you should go and pull the executive order and all of the attachments. And importantly, the point, Stephen, that you made about the social license, it ties the goal of still acting on these applications within a 2-year period that EPA has set as the goal of processing applications, either at the EPA or anywhere. And that 2-year period is consistent with the congressional action under NEPA, right, to get environmental impact statements done in a 2-year period. 2-year period for these large projects, it might surprise some listeners, but that is a reasonable time frame to expect a thorough review, a non-check the box process, Stephen, that you mentioned. So if you can comment on that. And then the other thing to comment on is really just to elaborate a bit that these 33 applications or so came in. You almost from day one were looking over these applications that, since, frankly, it took quite an effort to get Louisiana primacy, as well as other states, applicants are probably stacked up at the state level waiting for states to get primacy, in part because past EPAs didn't really grant Class 6 injection wells for CO2 for a variety of reasons. So maybe you can comment on those points.
I think those are all great points, Mark, and I appreciate that. What I think people gain an understanding of is just the sheer size of a permit application, right? We think of a permit application like you want to repave your driveway or do a little aesthetic work. You might have to get approval from your HOA. These things are in the high thousands of pages, right? 6, 7, 8, 9,000 pages full of very technical information that we look over very painstakingly, and we ask for clarification. We ask them for more and more information to make sure that the activity can be undertaken in a responsible manner, because we understand that we don't have a whole lot of we don't have room for carelessness on this process, and that's I think we're proud of our department's track record in protecting underground sources of drinking water, and we want that to continue all the way through.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. Let me turn now to some of the questions that we have that have been unanswered, and I'd like to reward our alert listeners who uh, have taken the time to not only listen but to ask informed questions. And this, Michael, this would be for you. We have a question really from a reporter who wants to know, have you seen, from your economic development point of view, um, any projects that have been declined or maybe delayed, or have you been informed that perhaps, they're not going to come to Louisiana? Do you have any insights on any direct impacts on, the governor's actions on any of these projects in Louisiana economically?
Yeah, no, I mean, thankfully, no, we haven't seen any negative impact or downturn. That, of course, Mark, and for the reporter from SB, that was obviously a concern at the outset of whether this would have any type of chilling effect. And I think what's happened is that there's been good outreach on the part of the state team, Louisiana Economic Development, Stephen and his team, and us, to prospects, explaining what the process is, and that we were really just digesting the existing pipeline of permits. And so, no, we honestly haven't seen any fall off or lost any projects that I'm aware of as a result.
Well, that's good. And of course, that message is sent not only to your fellow Louisiana citizens, it literally is sent globally.
That's correct.
Because Hyundai, the Koreans, all of our Asia partners, I mean, they all have targeted Louisiana and certainly the Gulf region for investments. We've seen that with LNG export facilities. So I think it's important that this message goes forth, that the governor has laid out a plan to deliberately consider those pending applications and still do them within a time frame that had been expected. And from your point of view, Louisiana is still open for business, and it appears as though those projects, will be hopefully, reach FID and go forward.
Sure. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the questions, well, there are several questions, Mark, that, I think that we'll turn to you to ask. And they're basic questions, right, about CO2 injection. And it's
Sure.
drinking water. Please explain to us how, since Class 6 is under the Safe Drinking Water Act permit, let's talk about aquifers for drinking water. You talked about the depth, but can you explain just a bit more about the threat of contamination to drinking water supplies? And from your engineering and your expertise point of view, talk to us about that and explain what goes into that assessment and what is the real likelihood of a threat, to drinking water sources.
Thank you. Well, let me caveat by saying with any engineering design, if properly done and properly operated, and the designs that are out there and the technology that's out there, just the site selection to pick an injection point is very detailed. The permitting that goes to DCE and is very detailed to show that we have the right porosity, we have the right permeability, which is what's going to move the product out there. We have the right well designs to handle any of the pressure that is going to occur. And then we have, as Stephen mentioned, the cap rock. We have to have, typically projects going to have multiple cap rocks, and then there's going to be monitoring over time. So these projects, if well done, are going to be highly protective of our drinking water aquifers. And again, we've got multiple cap rocks. We've got constant monitoring going on. So if done right, the likelihood of any risk to drinking water aquifer is going to be very low because of a properly done design.
Thank you. Another question we receive, and it's a question that we certainly get at USEA and certainly in Washington and the policy arenas a lot, is doesn't CCS, certainly CCUS, perpetuate the use of fossil fuels, right? And so, why are we even pursuing this technology? um, you know, both on a does this make good sense to perpetuate the use of fossil, and secondly, is it economical? Can you do it without tax incentives? What's the demand? Is the demand robust enough? Um,
Mhm.
and so this is probably each of you might have a view on this, and so let me, Mark, since you kind of have the floor at the moment. Mark, why don't you talk about it? Stephen, I'd like your view of it. And Michael, I'd like you to maybe go last. And in part, if I could have you focus maybe on like the Meta project, which to me was a global state solution to bring in
Mhm.
the world's largest data system, which include bringing in solar as well as CCS on the natural gas turbines, but maybe a bit more of a holistic approach. With that, Mark, would you like to take that?
Sure. When we look at, I think the proper way to look at energy is an energy portfolio. And as new technologies are coming online and or at commercial ready stage and they're going in large scale applications, we have to, today we have to realize that we don't have a replacement for natural gas or for our oil. Solar is tremendously advanced in the last 15 years, but it's not ready to be our only source of power generation in the United States. It's got a lot of good application and it's getting better with battery technology. So there to be technically honest, the maturity of some of our energy systems is not quite there yet for the scale we're going to need. We don't have the battery technology. We're going to need to keep the lights on and to run our vehicles for many years to come. We need it, and quite frankly, if engineered right and applied properly, natural gas is a fairly clean fuel. So it really gets down to, are we ready for prime time with any replacement? No. I know that there are groups that would like to see a complete elimination of fossil fuels, but we're not ready. Now let's take away the energy part and let's talk as a chemical engineer. Pharmaceuticals, plastics. We're going to need, we never talk about that, but we're going to need fossil fuels. They're the primary, pharmaceuticals, the primary feedstock is water and natural gas.
Mhm.
So, no, we're not ready to turn off those pipelines of our natural gas or our crude oil. We're working hard to get there, but the technical reality is, economically and technically, we're not there ready to turn that off. And I think we're looking at 75 years of fossil fuels still being a part of our energy portfolio.
Yeah, I'd go the in a different direction as well. If the answer, if the question is, can this help us continue our use of fossil fuels from a Louisiana perspective? I'd say hell yes. That's the hope, right? I mean, I think at some point, Governor Doug Burgum, now the the Secretary of Interior, said, this is not about climate change. This is about markets. And that could still hold true if you want our petrochemical products to be competitive on the global marketplace. I sometimes compare it to eggs. You know, you go to the supermarket and some people buy the regular Eggland's Best eggs, and there's nothing wrong with that. But some people are willing to pay $7, $8, $9 a dozen. Or even if you're at the farmer's market these days, it's like $10 a dozen. It's ridiculous. For eggs that they believe are raised in a manner that they like. And there's nothing economical or necessarily about chicken welfare that they should be paying a premium for, except they like it. And that's what they choose to do. So there's a farmer out there raising the pasture raised or the free range or the whatever eggs, and they get a premium for that product, and the grocery store should still carry it. So that's a comparison I like to make. And then when you talk about the decarbonization aspect, I don't see any more readily deployable technology out there to decarbonize an industrial process, right? I mean, solar powered is a grid enhancing asset, but it's or maybe a supplemental asset, but it doesn't create the types of heat you need to get up to cracking a molecule. And in the meantime, other technologies are out there, but they're more hypothetical. Carbon smokestack capture is deployable, and I think that gives it a huge advantage right now.
Michael?
Yeah, I love this question, Mark, because as was mentioned up front, by I think by you, this remarkable technology is getting attacked both by the left and the right. that's always a sign of the apocalypse when the far left and the far right come together on something. And just, and apologies for being blunt, but we get this a lot in Louisiana, so I want to just try to be direct. The people on the far left who don't like carbon capture don't like it because it works. They don't like it precisely because it makes natural gas, which is plentiful and very inexpensive, thanks to geology and fracking. It makes it something that is not bad for the environment. And they don't like that because they're just against molecules. They just don't like molecules. There have been people who have come out against the use of oxygen in Louisiana. Okay. Then on the far right, the people who are against it are folks who don't believe in climate change, don't believe in the need to be for clean energy, and so find the whole thing to be an expensive hoax, kind of like the back to lander extreme libertarian side. But for everybody that's living in between the 40-yard lines of reality, it is nothing comes close to it as a transition technology. If you want to use what Meta is doing up in Richland, again, it's the largest Meta plant AI facility in the country. It could eventually require 2 gigawatts of power, I believe. What they've committed to is to match 100% of their energy requirements with either renewable energy credits or new clean generation. They're doing this in a few ways. They've got a big solar program working with our utility, Entergy Louisiana, to develop, I think it's 1,500 megawatts of new solar capacity connecting to the regional grid. They're connecting to solar projects around the state. There's one called Lafitte Solar, which is, I think, 100 megawatts. Of course, they're also going to have battery storage to go along with that. And then the other thing is that to get the base load of 24/7, Entergy is building 3 new natural gas-fired plants, which will ultimately could be over 2 gigawatts. And so to do this and make it carbon neutral, they're going to be relying on carbon capture to abate what comes out of the generation. So the reality is that the only way that they can keep their promise, which has brand value and market value, as Stephen was saying, is to use this portfolio approach to clean energy. And so it's working, and the people who hate it don't like it because it's working.
Thank you.
And Mark, let me,
sir.
if I may add, we're an interesting point in society. And I know we've always over history probably said that, but I'm working on a new PowerPoint called "Damn If You Do, Damn If You Don't," because let's look what's happening in Louisiana too. As we're implementing solar energy on a utility scale, there's a huge revolt against, can we really field solar energy? Wind energy, we don't want to launch wind energy. So we're getting to a point where, as an engineer, you're damn if you don't. Even some of the same groups are dead set against CCS, but they're also against solar power. But they're going to want to go home and turn on their lights. They want to start their cars. So in today's internet-driven system, it's so easy to pass half-truths. But the reality is we've got to keep the lights on. My grandmother wants the lights on. I want to drive, and we want to make pharmaceuticals. And until we have that more carbonless solution that I think Mike and Stephen both talked about, we've got to have something. And it's amazed me. It's been amazing to me how much resistance we've seen on solar power. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox before I fall off.
One place, Mark Zappi, that we are doing better as a country, and we've come around, and frankly, Europe has had its hard lessons and come around too, including Germany, is we're coming back to nuclear. Because ultimately nothing comes close to nuclear. And now with the developments of small modular reactors and SMRs, it seems that the political ice on nuclear is thawing a little bit, which long-term I find encouraging. New Orleans, believe it or not, is 50% nuclear powered, and Louisiana is about 15-16%. Our nuclear power comes from Mississippi, which makes me nervous, but I don't want to offend anybody from Ole Miss on the call.
Well, you're bringing up nuclear. It's interesting. You mentioned SMRs. The newest members of USEA happen to be the fusion industry. because with our recent breakthroughs, obviously, of more energy output than where you can actually measure it, there's true enthusiasm and excitement about that. And just on the point of nuclear, Michael, we have seen some of the hyperscalers or data centers investors, doing arrangements for SMRs, and so we
Yeah.
see SMRs, and the future could very well be fusion, but still, carbon capture is going to play a role for a long time, and this is a question for all the panelists, and I think it builds on the Meta project. So why are we so concerned about the data centers, the use of AI? Right? So we all have become so dependent and expectant of the use of AI and for power to be there to actually provide us with that great technology in our everyday lives. So I'd like to each of you think about how you are doing what you are doing and the use of AI. So Stephen, in your regulatory process, right? Are you able to deploy and use certain analytical tools from AI to help you get through that assessment? I want you to think about that. Mark, obviously, I'm sure you and your many students have already come up with ways to solve problems using AI that has probably saved a whole lot of different of work. I'd like your views on how in this CCUS you might see it applying, or CCS, and of course. Michael, you probably use AI probably more than any of our panelists, and so I'd like to get your views on how AI also can be utilized to increase deployment of CCS in the U.S. Let me start with Stephen on the regulatory front. Are you
Absolutely.
able to use AI?
We are not currently using AI. We're definitely keeping an eye on it. We would love to gain some efficiencies from that, especially with the more routine tasks, right? We don't want AI checking somebody's geological work or their site or their well bore engineering work. I think you'll start to see those tools utilized first by the applicants themselves, because we're government. We don't move first. And that's with good reason, right? If we switched our systems over to the next big cool thing every single time, we'd spend a lot of money. And then when the product goes down or glitches or has a security breach, people would lose a lot of taxpayer trust and data. So we're not going to be first, but we're kind of looking to the markets all the time to see where that's at, and we're pretty optimistic that maybe during our time here that we'll be able to deploy some basic safe tools.
I appreciate your forthrightness on that. I will note that DOE has been trying to spend money to see how it is that AI can be used, because certainly the federal government, as well as all governments, accumulate a lot of digitized data and in the permitting. So, there is potentially a lot of data that's out there that can be utilized in some way, but
And we
certainly
have
that.
data across departments that we have a lot of silos of data within state government. And that is something that we're working really hard right now to try to break down. But boy, can those tools make it a lot easier in the future.
Thank you. Mark, let me turn to you on that question.
Sure. Well, I'm very high on it. I think it's an enabling technology. There's enough gray hair in this head of mine that I remember when computers were starting to come on board as an enabling technology. There was a lot of fear and concerns. Can we trust them? What can we do with them? Visualization was another enabling technology. I think AI is going to allow us to do data mining. Another aspect of technology is Internet of Things and sensor technology. We're generating massive amounts of data like we've never generated before. And our ability to quickly go through that data and look for trending that we might miss, AI gives us that tool. So as AI becomes more efficient, as we learn how to use it better, it's going to be, I think, one of the most critical enabling technologies for the next generation. So I think that we could stick our head in the sand and say, "Oh no, we're scared of it. It's not gonna do anything." But I could tell you, from medical imaging to there's not going to be an aspect of technology or science, or I think one day your average daily lives that AI won't be a critical part. So I'm very high on it. We are using it a lot at UL. We have several centers who are incorporating it. We just started the first one in the country, a master's in petroleum engineering on advanced computational tools with IoT, AI, and these type of technologies.
Internet of Things, IoT,
Yeah.
Internet of Things.
Now, I'll end it before passing on to Michael. As a teacher, it's a terror. So we're constantly talking about, how do we handle AI, and we're learning, and the students are pushing our abilities, but it's going to be around. It's not going to go away, and it is a power sucker. But if we're going to be a technological leader, and Louisiana really is, we're going to have these AI centers, and they're going to open a lot of doors for us to keep Louisiana on the map as a leading technology state.
Thank you. Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I mean, well, you're right. We are extensive users of AI here at Grid New Orleans Inc. In fact, I'm actually not real. This is actually an AI generated avatar. Yeah, they did away with the CEO as a cost saving measure a couple months ago.
Gemini's done a good job.
I thought he looked real good today.
I can change accents. I can tell you that. I can reaffirm you, whatever you need AI to do. But I can tell you, that notwithstanding, the two ways that we're using it now, which are really interesting to economic development in general, this is beyond just carbon capture, is on the supply side, we're actually about to implement an AI program that when a client or a prospect gives us a series of criteria, is able to do a much larger and quicker, more thorough boiling of the ocean to find an appropriate site. For example, one that would have access to a carbon transport pipeline. And then even more interestingly, on the demand side, we're working with a friend in Sweden who's working on an AI program that will analyze international or global corporate earnings, annual and quarterly reports, market trends, in order to try to infer which companies might be good clients to come to Louisiana to whom we should reach out. So we're actually using it as kind of like a giant economic development dating app by having both supply and demand algorithms to try to increase our hit rate.
Thank you. Let me turn to a technical question that has plagued, some of the early CCUS projects. The Petronova project I was reminded of, had a reservoir pressure problem ultimately, to where the field didn't necessarily respond as initially thought. In Louisiana, you have all these multiple potential reservoirs of where it can go in. The question that we have by an alert listener is, how is reservoir pressure management being addressed as a project economic risk, right? Because you're going to have so many of these projects in relative close proximity. Stephen, I'll start with you. Mark, this could very well be, one that you would like to weigh in on.
Yeah, so kind of as we brought up before, our area of review includes the entire area where you're going to be increasing pressure. So that's our area of review. I think we may have seen one proposed project where the AOR would overlap with the pre-existing AOR. That is not something that we would be reviewing that application at this time. If you have overlapping areas of review for the time being, we are not going to be processing that activity.
Okay. Mark, do you see a physical impact?
Well, if properly designed, you're monitoring the pressures constantly. You don't want to over pressurize your system. We've known this for 50 years. So pressure monitoring is part of the proper operation of a system. If unitization is overlapping, like Stephen said, I don't think at this point we're seeing that. And I don't know if that would be allowed. That's going to be up to our geophysicists and our regulatory boards. But a properly operated system is going to have intensive, very close monitoring of those pressure transducers. And it's not going to be at one point. These are multiple transducers, and they want to make sure that they're not overpressuring, not causing any excess fracturing anywhere. They want to make sure they're getting a good, smooth dispersion of the supercritical CO2 as it's being ejected.
Okay, thank you. I have a question about pipelines and potentially railways coming into Louisiana. Mark, you had mentioned that, pipelines can be long, they can be short. This has been certainly an issue looking at the federal level on interstate pipelines. That brings in FERC, it brings in STB, it brings in a variety of federal agencies. Um, but I didn't know the answer to this question. How many of the applications or the import of CO2 that is actually captured or produced in another state for storage in Louisiana? Is that an issue? Or are you all, at all concerned about how the CO2 gets into the state? Stephen, let me start. Stephen, do you know if any applicants are that we're going to be storing CO2 that's captured outside of the state?
Well, no, I don't have something like that in front of me right now. What I could say is that, in our analysis, your off taker, your economic impact, definitely factors into that. I would say that a lot of the CO2 that's currently moving through the state originates in Mississippi and winds up in Texas for EOR activity. So I think that's probably the par for the course right now is that it's just flowing through, and maybe picking up some more off takers along the way to wind up in Texas. But it's a long pipeline. It's been operating for a pretty long time in the state. Very few incidents and no fatalities to date. So I think a lot of people are maybe not as aware of all the carbon activity that's currently going on underground. But no, as of right now, I don't have it in front of me for where everybody's off taker is. But I could say Louisiana's better.
Uh, Mark, you had a slide up about, I guess, the Jackson cap.
The
So that's
Jackson
coming into
Dome.
Louisiana, the dome, and going across. So do you see any interstate pipelines bringing that in? I mean, is that an issue
Well,
for
I,
policymakers to address?
I want to try to stay technical on my side, but I mean, there's a possibility of EOR off takers that may want to utilize it, particularly that now that they've upped the amount of per tonnage they can get with the new version of 45Q. So there may be that occurring down the road, but I'm not aware of any right now. Um, I've tended to stay away from individual projects because as an academic, I consider myself a neutral source. I'm going to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly. If I had a longer presentation, I would have talked about the Mississippi release where nobody was killed. And so again, like you mentioned, it's important to keep on hitting home how safe pipelines technically have been for the amount of tonnage that has passed over the years. But to get down to your original question, I'm not aware of any at this time, and I wouldn't because I don't review the permits.
Okay. One question that we have, and I think it's a good one. We're talking about long-term storage. Um, so and typically you would expect on the monitoring requirements, you have now primacy, you have to make sure you have a robust verification and monitoring process in place. Um, can you talk about the length of time that these sites are insured and bonded after closure to protect the state financially? Is that a consideration either in the application or Mark, is that something that you've been asked or even Michael, when you go and recruit entities to move in here, is that a requirement that you make them have so that, what's in the ground stays in the ground and it's insured and for generations to come that there's no danger, if you will, or the danger is minimized. Let me start with Mark for technical aspects to that. What happens
Right.
to the CO2 when it goes in? It's supercritical. Then what happens to it over time?
Well, there's 4 or 5 key reactions. The primary for the first 10 or so 20 years is going to be the supercritical is going to float on that brine water in the injection point because it has a lower density and it gets up against the caprock and that's why we want to ensure we have good caprock integrity. And over time, it's going to work into the micro fissures. Some of it's going to dissolve. It's also going to be moving out, and getting that outward unitization going on. Eventually, with many of our formations, you're going to end up forming a hard solid and making carbonate rocks out of it. many years to come. But the primary early into the injection is going to be the cap rock itself, that physical seal that's going to happen. With regard to pressurization and that, again, it's going to be just good, really good monitoring to ensure that we've got no issues technically down there. And by the way, they'll do geophysical analysis. They'll do a variety of tests. But on the regulatory side of it, I'll kick it to Stephen and let him address it if he wants to tackle that.
Yeah, no, financial
Thanks,
security.
huh?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Zappi. No, financial security for these sorts of projects is a fun topic, and because there's different activities that you want to be bonding out for, right? So you're going to need your pollution. That's more of like an insurance product, right? A liability insurance. You're going to need the bonding for your decommissioning and for your ongoing liabilities, and then you're going to need a kind of a big just liability insurance to make sure that whenever emergency response is required, that the applicant is going to have the financial wherewithal to respond to the things that pop up. So we're going to be collecting a variety of different insurance products, surety bonds, and things of that nature for this activity. But for the containment itself, for the geologic storage itself, I need to look up the rule. I know it's for the foreseeable future. That is certainly the case. Now, can these projects reach a point where they are stable enough that they're completely closed out and you can offload that, you could discontinue that financial security? That could be possible, but that's not something we're really looking at this time. For right now, we'd be requiring an ongoing a product posted to make sure that the project is safe. We're kind of more at the injection phase of this process right now than we are at the kind of closeout. But I think as of right now, they have to provide security for post-injection site care perpetually until anything else changes on the ground or in rules, which would be a future problem. Right now, perpetually.
Thank you. Michael, I'll probably give you the last word because as you can see behind me in our nation's capital, the sun is setting.
Yeah.
And the sun is setting
I
on
thought it was morning in America, Mark.
So, what's your view on the economic front on these issues?
I think that the misstep and the mistake that we made as an industry and as political leaders and even as academics is we didn't get in front and explain carbon capture from a safety, from an efficacy, from an economic and security standpoint on the front end. And so that's what we're having to do, to kind of play this a little bit from behind. But I think that because of those things being real, we're going to see carbon capture be a very important part of our energy economy for the next generation. As folks have said, until something comes along like fusion that makes this something that is less efficient. Ultimately, efficiency is going to rule the day in energy. So I think that the future in Louisiana is looking very good for the midterm. And I just think we have to recognize that whatever the new technology that comes next wave, whether it's nuclear or fusion or something else, that, again, as practitioners, we have to recognize that the internet abhors a vacuum. We have to make sure that there is no information vacuum up front.
Well, as you can see in the chat box, and these are not notes coming from my mother, that this has been a fantastic panel discussion. We've had several of our listeners weigh in and want to thank everybody for participating. So please accept my thanks and really do appreciate it. I've learned a lot. I think our policymakers in Washington and our listening audience has learned a lot. So let me thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Alex for final words. Alex?
Great. Thank you, Mark. And thank you both, Marks, and thank you, Michael, and thank you, Stephen. This has been a really engaging and educational conversation. I feel like we could have kept it going for another hour. given all the questions that have come in and comments made. But as Mark mentioned, sun's setting, and I know I have a almost 3-year-old that I need to get home to. So we do have to call this, unfortunately. Again, this was the fourth and final part in our CCUS Demystified series. If you missed the first set, we have the recordings all up on our website at usea.org. So please feel free to take a look at those recordings. As mentioned at the top, we plan to post the recording of this one in the next day or two, and we'll notify everyone once that happens. So thank you to everyone who attended and who stayed with us. Thank you to our panelists, and we hope to see everyone soon.
Thank you.